Charity is not something that you would discuss at a cocktail party, for instance, but it's very important to plan for. John Bromley is the Chief Executive Officer of Charitable Impact, and he's going to join us right after this word from our sponsor. John, a real pleasure to meet you.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Uh, uh, how can you not talk about charity? Because it is such an important part of the investment world, if you will. But before we get into what charitable impact actually does, talk to me about the state of charitable giving in Canada right now. How would you describe it?
Well, there's a couple ways to describe it. One, I would say people are they're unfamiliar with it. I think that the fact that there's increasingly nowhere to learn about how to go about charitable giving is one of the biggest problems facing the sector. I mean, that's unlike knowing how to go about playing a sport, right? You can go find a team, you can sign up, you can get a coach, you can, try it out. If you don't like that sport, you can shift. So one answer is it's unfamiliar. So people are unfamiliar with charitable giving. So what happens with that? Lower confidence. When our confidence is lower, we find excuses not to participate. And what the data is showing is that fewer Canadians, fewer among us are participating by making charitable gifts of time and of money. Okay, so it's a volunteering problem as well as a giving money away problem. And those of us who are giving away money still are giving away less as a percentage of our income. So there's less participation in charitable giving. You might ask why, but if I can just jump to that real quickly, it's not because I think there's some crisis of generosity in Canada or in the United States where the data is largely the same. I generally think it's because people don't really feel comfortable knowing about how to go about and creating a good experience for themselves, making charitable giving a part of their lifestyle. So instead of being proactive about something, another brief way to answer your question is we're very reactive with charitable giving. When we're asked through a kind of sales fundraising construct, we think about it, we might say yes, but we don't come from intrinsic to ourselves and say, what do we care about most? Why? And how can I give my time and or my money towards helping that cause?
John, in the past, I've had it described that wealthy people were the ones that were charitable and that less wealthy people were not. And you saw, examples of that when people name wings of hospitals and that kind of stuff going on. But then when I look on the street, if there's a bum on the street who needs assistance of some descript, it's usually the person that doesn't look like they can afford it that gives them some money. And, whether it's a buck for coffee or something along those lines. Is there a social status associated to charitable giving?
There shouldn't be. The data in the past is that, you know, people with lower incomes actually give a higher percentage of their income away. So you could argue they're more generous,
Right,
right?
exactly. That's
Um, no, shout out to wealthy people. I think, admittedly, it's hard to give away, such big numbers, right? It's literally hard to do it well, and it does take time to get good at anything in life, including charitable giving. But there's this growing perception that giving is for the wealthy, and I think that's really dangerous. First of all, there's very few wealthy people out there, even if they have a larger and larger concentration of money. So if they stop giving and the rest of us aren't giving, the charitable sector is going to crumble. I would argue in Canada today, we have that major risk. There's fewer and fewer people participating. And so if some wealthy people jump out of the sector for any reason or die and pass their money down to children who aren't active, then we've got a real rough time ahead. But the other reason why it's problematic is because like charitable giving, like exercise or like sport, should just be a part of our lifestyle. And you can play, you can enjoy it, you can try hiking and go back to cycling. You don't like cycling, you can play hockey. You don't like hockey, you can play soccer. No one really should be telling you what sport to play, but the idea of being active and physically active and socially active related to sport is important. And I would argue that philanthropy is, when practiced well, the same thing. It's a social thing. You can do it with friends. You can have conversations about it. It's a great way to get to know someone. It's not just for wealthy people.
yeah, and indeed there's a degree of internal satisfaction that you did it, right?
Well, we have three beliefs at Charitable Impact. Not to jump there, but what the first belief is that everyone has something they care about changing in the world,
Mm.
right? Everyone has something they care about changing in the world. The second belief is that everyone has something to give towards creating that change, whether it's your time, your talent, and or your money. And the third belief, which you just touched on, is when you give, you get something in return. There is necessarily benefit on the receiver of who you give money to, but it's really important to acknowledge that when we give, we also feel a sense of meaning. We feel a sense of well-being. And there's even some science and social science to corroborate that. But you don't need the science because you know that when you do something nice for someone else, it's helpful to you as much as it's helpful to them.
Yeah, absolutely true. Okay, let's go through charitable impact and talk about the structure. And I'll break down those three components a little bit because on your website it says, you're nurturing and you're creating change. I want to get to that, but let's talk about the structure. What do you actually do at Charitable Impact?
Sure, sure. Well, we're a very donor-centered service. So donors are people and donors are companies, for example, right? These are people who give money and or time away to whatever cause or charity they want to. And so we're a donor-centered service. And so what that means is that we serve the donor regardless of how much money they give away. We talked about that, what causes they care about, ultimately what charities they want to support. So we act a lot like a bank, if you will, for charitable giving. Now, to be clear, we're not a bank, we're a registered charity. Okay. But from a donor's perspective, you can open up your own impact account at Charitable Impact. It's what's known as a donor advised fund. It's analogous to having a bank account for charitable giving. Here's how it works. You put your donation in, might be a credit card, might be so cash, it might be publicly traded securities, right? It could even be private company shares or real estate if you've got more money and you're more sophisticated in that way. But you put your donation in, you get a tax receipt immediately. Then
Oh,
you can sit on that money while you take the time to think through how you want to use that money that you've already donated into the charitable sector, but not yet to the end using charity you want to give it to. So you can take the time and space you need to think through how you want to use that money to create the most impact. Right? There's 85,000 registered charities in Canada, so lots of choice. There's lots of different causes from poverty relief to health to advancing education. Religion is also charitable in Canada. So there's lots and lots and lots of stuff you can do with your charitable dollars. So what Charitable Impact aspires is that people really, participate, number one, even if they don't know what end charity to give to yet. And then they take the time and space and they separate the decision making between, am I going to give some of my money away to charity, from the second decision, which is, how am I going to use that money to create the most impact? You know more about the world than I do, but that's how we go about investing our money, generally speaking, right? We put it in an account, we may or may not have an advisor, and then we decide from there what stocks we want to buy. Why don't we give charitably that way? Generally, it's because something like Charitable Impact hasn't been made accessible to all Canadians.
do you provide counsel? Let's say I don't know what charity I want to send it to. Do you provide counsel?
We have a philanthropic advisory team, and we provide counsel because we know from our experience that one of the biggest reasons people don't participate in charitable giving is they don't really have the comfort or confidence to know how to go about doing it. They
Mm.
usually know what causes they care about, but they don't know how to go about doing it. So we provide what we refer to as philanthropic advisory. We don't charge for it. Actually, you can just call us. You can talk through what you're trying to achieve. We'll help you understand our system. We'll help you understand, how it works, so you can decide on your own whether to use it or not to manage your charitable giving.
Do you manage the money that you receive?
We do. So in between the donation being made to us and going out to the end using charity, once you've chosen that, we manage the money. And in fact, people who have larger accounts can open an account with their with a investment manager that they recommend, and have those assets managed by that manager. So as a result, our charitable investment account, which is more like the investment account, unlike the impact account, which we would describe as a checking kind of or savings account, for your charitable giving. Uh, our charitable investment account structure works with, hundreds of different investment managers across every bank and in Canada.
85,000 charities is staggering. If somebody walks in the door, where do you start? Do you do the macro picture or do you get into micro, or how do you do that?
Well, I don't always use this language, but there's this other word that is used with for charity, which is philanthropy. Have you heard that word before?
Sure.
So philanthropy, it comes from this, the root of that, the etymology of that is the love of mankind. So I think love is a really key word. So normally where you start, you don't have to use this cheesy sounding language, but it's sort of like, what do you love most? Like, I mean, other than yourself and your and you know your possessions and maybe your direct family. When you think about something that you want to create change for, what is it you love? Is it the environment? Is it sport? Is it education? And you really want to try to think about who you are and how you became who you are, and start with what you care about most,
Hmm.
and then separately kind of going, oh, are there charities for that, and which ones of those are the best in my opinion, right? Because there might be a good charity out here in Vancouver where I'm at, but you might live in Toronto or Saskatoon and you might want to give locally, which is often the case with many donors. So, but in either case, starting with what you love, then moving through, how that relates to the kind of change you want to see in the world by giving, and then maybe considering something like the geography. And after going through some of those more obvious, intuitive questions, that's the time when I would suggest, okay, get into the merits of the specific charity, right? If you jump to the merits of the charity, you can get lost in all sorts of details that are confusing.
I want to talk about the merits of a charity in a moment, but before we do, it's sometimes more than money. If you love something, it's volunteering your time. Does charitable impact play a role in that, in counseling that area?
Through our philanthropic advisory, surely we will help you, think through how you can give away your time. Today, the platform doesn't have a mechanism to record, your volunteering of time, but it's something that we plan on building in the future.
Hmm. Okay, impact is part of your name. How do you measure impact? How do you make a difference in society and be able to measure that? Because we know there's all kinds of agencies out there that measure how efficient charities are, and I guess that's an important consideration. But then you have to measure your own impact, don't you?
I think it's really important that's a great question, and it's a hard question to answer. I think it's important for people to understand how they feel about their charitable giving. And I'll give you a quick analogy. And I know you've got a serious athletic background, right? So, like, how do you know whether you had impact on the field when you're playing soccer, or when you're on the ice playing hockey? How do you know? I mean, part of it is really understanding the game well, and part of it is also understanding yourself and how you felt about your game. So part of getting into charitable giving is being able to deal with yourself and how you feel about the decisions you've made. And one of the reasons we want people to find confidence in their charitable giving over time is because people who are confident and into playing hockey or into giving charity for their own reasons that they enjoy, they're able to deal with the bumps and bruises that come along, right? You're not going to win every game you play. You're not going to win every face-off you take. So you're not going to make every single donation you make isn't going to be to the very best charity that ever existed. That's not possible. So really, I'd start with this idea of being, as a charitable donor, being prepared to think through your impact and doing enough work to create a sense of belief with yourself as to how much impact you had. From there, that's a bit more subjective than personal, okay? But I think it's really important. From there, you can get into, the merits of what a good charity are.
Hmm.
But it's important to understand there that then you get into all sorts of technical stuff that can be difficult. Like, what are the merits of a good stock to invest into? You can go through ratios, you can talk about financial statements, you can do all this stuff. But at the end of the day, that can be applied to charitable giving for what it's worth. Okay, to analyze a charity, there are financial statements that are publicly available, etc. But also, for example, when we think about companies to invest into, we think about, well, who's the management team? What sector are they in, and how much growth is there? Why do I want to be invested into that? So all of these things layer into the question of impact with charitable giving. One of the
Should we go in?
downsides, really briefly, one of the
Oh,
downsides is like with
yes.
the stock market, you go, is the price up or is it down?
Yeah.
Right? With the charitable world, you can't quite get such a good sense because It's how effective was that program, right? And there's not always clear metrics for that.
You make the investment in the stock market analogy there, and coming from sports, which was a great analogy too, you go into the sport with an outcome, with goal setting. We're going to win this game, or we're going to get the championship. And I coached at a really high level, and you always started the season off looking at that kind of an approach overall. But like the stock market, sometimes you get in there, your goal setting gets shot in the first few minutes. Is it more about the process then?
That's such a great question and statement along with it. Yeah, so I do think it's about the process, right? It's about the process of the game, and then you see whether you win or lose, and then you make adjustments from there. And either way, I think a lot of athletes, I mean, as a failed, athlete myself, I look back and I go, you know what? I loved that season, even though we came out with too many losses, right? I had a lot of fun playing, and I want to play again next year. And here's some things I might do to make myself better for next year. And so charitable giving should be looked at exactly the same way. And I actually love your word process. I think it is ultimately more about the process and the enjoyment of the journey as much as it is about the feeling and ultimately then over time, the knowledge that you have had impact on the world.
I love this whole concept of charity giving, and I've been involved in many charities in the past, but it is a kind of a competitive field. I mean, you talk about the 85,000 charities themselves competing. You compete, I would think, against, other organizations that do kind of similar things. Plan International is one I've had work with. Canada Helps is another one. How would you describe your difference?
Well, Canada Helps is really well-known organization, and they're a fantastic organization. I'm a huge fan of Canada Helps. Um, the way I describe our difference from them, we're very different, and I don't really think we compete with them at all. We certainly don't try to. They really make it easy for any registered charity who doesn't want to spend a ton of money on putting up a website and creating a sophisticated donation platform to make it easy for anyone to give to them. So Canada Helps does that very effectively. I would generally say they're focused on charities and they make it easy for donors to give to charities. We're kind of the opposite of that. We're focused on the donor, and we make it easy for the donor to donate, even if they don't know yet what registered charity they want to give to, right? That's why we have this donor advised fund impact account, right? I want my kids to learn how to save money, even if they don't know yet how they're going to spend it. So I want donors to learn how to get involved with giving charitable donations and making it a part of their lifestyle, even if they don't know yet what exact charity they're going to benefit. So that's a very, very big distinction between us and Canada Helps, and why I don't think we compete. And but hey, I'm a big fan of Canada Helps, and they're a fantastic organization.
They are. Both organizations are fantastic. Okay. How long has Charitable Impact been around, and where do you see that organization in 5 years' time?
Charitable Impact's been around since 2011, so call that 13 years. We've done about $1.4 billion in donations into our platform. Our aspiration is to, you mentioned it earlier, but our aspiration is to nurture donors along the way, and that means meeting more donors. And so we want to create an environment that's really for anybody. First of all, small donors participate in Charitable Impact as large donors do. By way of example, our largest account has well north of $50 million of assets in one account. And yet both of my children, who are 11 and almost 13. Oh my goodness, I can't believe that they're a teenager. Both have impact accounts, and my wife and I give them a charity allowance every month, right? And so that's like $10 in our case. We give them $10 a month that goes into their account, and one of them actually likes to give it away right away to his organizations of choice, and the other one's kind of saving it up to make a bigger impact with someone. The point of that is to say that charitable impact is built for everyone, regardless of how much money you have. So what we see over time is, more people coming in and adopting uh, uh, almost like a bank account like approach to charitable giving, right? Where you have this account, you can put money into it anytime you want. You know it's going to be there when you come back to see it, and when you're ready to spend, when you're ready to make that decision. You're going to buy a Toyota and not a Hyundai or whatever. Okay. Maybe a Tesla. I don't know what you're into. Okay. Then go and make the purchase decision. In other words, that's when you make the allocation to the charity. In that environment, we want to see a reinvigorated charitable donation population in Canada. We want to see more people participating as donors, and we want to see more people having fun with it. If I could say one other thing, we're also moving into helping communities give. So what's a community? I mean, a sports club's a community, right? A school is a community. Workplaces are communities. So where's the tools to help those communities really make giving a part of their culture? We have very clear vision on how what we're doing can help make giving a part of those cultures by solving the problem of here's how you make giving a part of a school without, having to tell every kid who's participating which exact charity to give to.
Wow, interesting. Well, let's hope that the process catches, like a pandemic, maybe, in the good sense of a pandemic. John, thank you so much for your time. And I wish you
Thank you.
continued success.
Thank you very much, Pat. I appreciate the conversation. That was fun.
Yeah. John Bromley, Chief Executive Officer of Charitable Impact.